with that, I'm going to ask Senator Mallow, what mic are you?
Seven.
To open us with an invocation.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Let us bow for a word of prayer. Most precious Lord in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We come to you now, this sacred hour, that our lives might be changed. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to serve the state of Georgia. We thank you for this opportunity to try to build and make better lives in our community. And Father, we thank you for your grace that keeps us day by day. Lord, it is your servant's prayer that in this meeting you simply have your way. And all those who agree and like mine will say amen.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone that there are sign-up sheets on the witness table if anybody neglected to sign up, and we'll decide how long people get to speak based on what time it is when we get going. We have 3 bills on the calendar this afternoon: Senate Bill 45, Senate Bill 216, and Senate Bill 133. And we are going to let Senator Anavitarte come. What? Yeah, and Commissioner Brose is here, and she's going to be speaking to us later, but thank you so much for coming with staff from your department. And the juvenile judges, we have representation, and thank you so much for coming. Okay, Senate Bill 45, and what I'm working on is LC 49-1359S. Is that what you got?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee, and I'm going to try and be brief. It has already been a long day. So this is Senate Bill 45, dealing with epilepsy school seizure action plans. Senate Bill 45 provides for the care of students being epilepsy or a seizure disorder, provides for the completion, submission, review, and implementation of seizure action plans, requires the Department of Education to develop training guidelines and model seizure action plans for use by local school systems, and provides for the training and designated school personnel. In summary of what Senate Bill 45 does is parents or guardians of a student being treated for epilepsy or seizure disorder may work with a student's physician to make an action plan for incidents that may occur when a student is at school. Seizure action plans must be in writing and must identify and describe the student's diagnosis and symptoms, outline and support of services the child may need, list the student's daily emergency medications, identify any special considerations and precautions that should be considered for the student to participate in school, describe the student's level of understanding and ability to manage epilepsy and seizure disorder, include contact information for the students and parents or guardians being treated, a statement of acknowledgement and release of the students, parents or guardians, allowing sharing of medical information between the student's physician, and school nurse to other state employees as seen necessary. The whole action plan must be signed by the parent and the physician responsible. And finally, Senate Bill 45 requires a school nurse or trained seizure action personnel, if available, if an incident happens. So from the original bill, we've gone through a couple of substitutes, and I do want to thank first AJ Taylor, who, AJ, I guess we've been working on this bill for what, 12 months, 16 months? I mean, feels like almost 2 years, I think, to get to this place. And because of AJ, I'm going to let him talk for a minute and a second, we're bringing this bill to you today. I also want to recognize all of the school district leaders from across the state who have given us input, their willingness to be collaborative on this. And I do want to also give personal thanks to you, Senator Kirkpatrick, and I know also Senator Watson for his input. I think when AJ first reached out, I think he reached out to Senator Watson in the beginning to start this process. And so this has been a really positive exercise with both Republicans and Democrats, and it just being overall collaborative. Really briefly, just the changes from the original bill to the current substitute we have in front of you was the school requirements in terms of changing the number of teachers that are trained. So right now, the original bill had 3 teachers, and now it's 1 per grade, increasing the overall number of educated teachers. Annually is added to a section regarding epilepsy or seizure action plan submission so that the plan is updated yearly. In the list of daily and emergency medications related to students' treatments, the substitute includes a note to add any rescue medications prescribed by the physicians and guidance on how to identify when and administer such medications. We also, in the substitute, added a provision that if a trained nurse or seizure action plan is not available, then other school personnel authorized to begin procedures, but also not limited to calling 911. Another edit or amendment in the substitute was keeping a copy of the seizure action plan readily available for school personnel working in the main office of a school. The governing body over seizure plans should ensure expertise is available to aid any additional training. And then the final update that we just made in the last 12 hours to the sub in front of you, after lines 135, the words healthcare professional, the rest of section B is cut out and instead replaced with the phrasing and shall be based on guidelines developed by the Department of Education as provided in subparagraph E2A of the code section. This change would basically remove any additional qualifiers for the training and just require systems to use healthcare professionals as they often use their school nurse for many other such things already. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I'll turn it back to you, and if you'd like to hear from any of the advocates, they're here in the room today.
Thank you. First, we'll see if the committee has questions. I think we have a couple. Senator Merritt.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator, thank you. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. Just a question. How do we prevent any HIPAA violations?
So all of that is guaranteed, as we wrote into the bill. Also, it doesn't require a teacher to have to be trained, so there's an option or an opt-out if a teacher decides not to. Also, too, it removes all liability from those involved at the school nurses or whatever. So all of that information and then the liability protections and all that are in here. So it gives the school districts greatest flexibility and also making sure those safeguards are in place.
And
great question.
Yeah, and Senator, I think that's addressed in the part about the seizure action plan around line 20-something. Okay, and Senator Mallow?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Senator Diana Vitarte. I have an adopted sister that has epilepsy, and one of the things we always struggled with was she had a magnet and a device implanted in her breastplate to help ease seizures, and you just had to wand her with the magnet. It was one of the toughest things to get people to understand. Sometimes she couldn't bring her magnet. Teachers didn't understand, and she was special needs. She was born premature. And it's been a process. She still does today. About 26 years old, have this device, and in fact, we've had to replace it. So my question to the senator is, with having this seizure action plan, does it take into account all of those students that do have the inserted medical devices? Because one of the other things that was very dangerous to her was a requirement to be by a microwave. That if you were to start a microwave by her and she was in close proximity, microwave would spark out and it could have damage to her device. And that was one of the toughest things that people couldn't understand that. So I just want to make sure, even in classrooms that have microwaves and those things, for these students that do have these devices, will this bill further protect them to ensure that those devices, everyone is made aware of what could be catastrophic for a student that suffers with epilepsy that has one of those devices?
So my initial reaction is I think that would be or should be captured in the action plan, right, so it's documented. I don't know if AJ, you want to talk about that just briefly in terms of, here, come on up here, have a seat. But it should be, and that's a great question, Senator Mallow.
Yes, so
introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm AJ Taylor. I've been working with Senator Anna Vitarte on this for 18 months now. In the seizure action plan provided by the Epilepsy Alliance of America, and it addresses all types of seizures, and it can address things such as the medical devices needed to stop seizures as well.
Thank you. Is it 12? Senator Brass?
Just a point of clarification. First of all, thank you to the author and to AJ for working on this. Certainly support the bill. Clarification, please, on line 105. No later than August 1st, 20. And again on line 110. Can you clarify that for me?
So, yeah, I mean, basically these two sections are,
So we would do that immediately. So August 1st is soon,
right.
okay? And do you feel comfortable that this can be accomplished in that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, and I know the department's in the room and they may have thoughts on this, but I think in terms of developing a model seizure and action plan form, and I think getting in this place, I mean, to me and the advocates who have done this in many other states, such as Florida, Texas, and others, I don't think that's a heavy lift. But
Very good.
But I won't speak for.
I just wanted to ask the question that
That's
you
fair.
know,
No,
as
it's a
long
very
as
fair
as
question.
the author and the department is comfortable with that, we're talking 6 months, less than 6 months.
You want to talk about that?
I'm
I
just
know
saying-
they're in
I'm
the
just
room, and
saying,
if they want to
yeah.
comment, I'll let them comment.
Right.
But
I mean,
but I
I'm
wanna make sure
happy
it's
for that.
flexible.
I mean, please don't get me wrong.
Right.
I'm delighted, but I would suggest that that's a short.
Okay.
Okay, I imagine if they object to that, they're going to let us know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Senator Merritt, did you have another question?
I did not.
That was Senator Mallon.
Oh, Senator Mallon, sorry.
Just for the department, the Georgia Department of Education, isn't it not true, Senator Anna Vitarte, that it's easier to implement policy at the start of school than something mid-school year, so that
Yeah.
staff and personnel can be trained out of the gate before school starts in professional development and learning days of what will be required, and not try to do that mid-school year? That's why the August
Yeah.
1 is important.
So one of the things I know myself, AJ, I think everybody that's been working on this for the last year, and I do want to thank Buddy Cosley, who's over here to my right, and his feedback and the folks he represents, because we do recognize that. I mean, my wife's a teacher, so we recognize the burdens in the preschool session trainings that teachers deal with at all sorts of levels, in the classroom, out of the classroom, school security, you name it, that they go through. So we're trying to be mindful of, striking the right balance, but also doing this at the beginning of the year, obviously, to your point, makes sense. My only concern is if we give greater length of time, then this would probably push into 2024, and so.
I'm supportive.
But it's a good question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. We have a number of people signed up, and I'm going to ask the people that want to speak to keep your remarks to 2 minutes. And if someone's already made your point, if you just want to stand up and say you support the bill, that's completely fine. So the first one on the list is Jeff Hubbard. Mr. Hubbard, if you just introduce yourself and who you represent.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm Jeff Hubbard with the Cobb County Association of Educators. However, more importantly, today I am the dad of a 14-year-old girl with epilepsy. I am deeply appreciative for this bill and looking at it. I didn't get a chance to read the substitute last night, but only 3 things I would ask for in this bill. Although we're working with the Department of Education, and I know the Epilepsy Foundation, I'm sure it's got something to do with it. I would also ask, we have the leading urology clinic for children here in the Southeast at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I would ask that, their input be suggested in regards to the seizure action plan. The second thing I saw that I wanted to make sure that the senator could confirm for me in the bill, as I said, that it will be presented to the school. Because of this type of disability, it actually needs to be on a student's 504 plan. So if that language is not already in the bill, I would greatly request that it be in there. And the last thing, since it includes public and private schools, I would ask that it be non-waiverable, that no school could take any part of this bill out or waive it at all, because this is too important for kids like my daughter.
And could you just, for the members of the committee that aren't in the school system, talk about 504 plan?
Absolutely. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Plan outlaws discrimination against people with disabilities in facilities that get funding for public schools. So it is to make sure that their disabilities are addressed within the plan by giving them services, materials, or technology, and this is the most important for my daughter, making changes to her learning environment so she has the most free and appropriate educational setting she can have, even with her seizure activity at school.
In the bill on line 74, it does say a student's school choice shall in no way be restricted because the student has a seizure action plan. Is that language comfortable with you? Are you comfortable
I
with
actually would need to request that the staff attorney answer that, because it is my opinion that I believe we should have the federal language in there regarding 504 protection for the child. But if the staff attorney believes that that would pass muster, constitutional muster, then I would be fine with that.
that? Okay,
Thank you so much for the question, Senator. That concludes my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator Estes.
Thank you. I just had a question, Mr. Hubbard, really quickly.
Oh.
Because I was unfamiliar whether 504 plans were required for anyone who has a history of epilepsy, or does
Normally they are. In my 38 years of experience, when a child had a disability such as that, in regards to a medical disability, as both a teacher as an administrator, when we had something that severe, a 504 plan had to be enacted for that child to protect their rights to free and appropriate education within the limitations of their disability.
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Estevez.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, AJ Taylor, do you have anything to add?
So like I said earlier, I'm AJ Taylor. I've been working with Senator Ana Vitarte on this for a while now. Thank you for letting me be here. I've been living with epilepsy since 2008, having my first seizure at 14 years old after not having a single seizure prior or any kind of medical issue up until that point. I'm now 28, officially making it half my life being living with epilepsy. At 14, I became a stat. I was the 1 out of 26 that would develop epilepsy. I was the 1 out of 10 that would have a seizure in their lifetime. At 14, I saw epilepsy change my life. I saw doctor after doctor. I took test after test and went through medication after medication. I saw tears in my mom's eyes I never wanted to see, and worry in my dad's face. I'll never forget going to school the day after my first seizure and telling one of my friends what had happened. The response isn't that the weird thing where you just fall on the ground and shake. I was weird. I was different from the other kids. My parents had conversations with teachers every year when I went to school. But I went to school every year wondering, who's going to take care of me if I have a seizure here at school? Are they going to know not to stick something in my mouth, not knowing that I could break my teeth? Will someone not know to lean me on my side so I don't choke on my own spit or the blood coming from my blood-bitten tongue? Will they know to move items out of the way, such as desk or chairs, so I don't injure myself? Will they know to time the seizure, or will they be scared of me when I'm on the floor? Over the years, I've had to teach people how to take care of me because I wasn't sure if I was safe. I never want a student experiencing a seizure disorder or epilepsy, which is already hard enough, to feel like they're unsafe walking into school. I've learned a lot from growing up with epilepsy. I've had to warp ignorance and bullying into a great appreciation for self-worth. I learned how to be brave and live in strength even when myself or others thought I was weaker than. I learned the importance of community through love and shared from my family and friends. When I almost lost my life to epilepsy, in 2014, it inspired me to live different and share my story instead of fearing it. But my story only represents one type of seizure, as we've seen on the panel today. There are more than just grand mal seizures. Epilepsy and seizure disorders have been feared all throughout history, and some even related it to demonic possession. And today, most people only know about seizures through what they've seen on TV. The best way to beat fear is through acknowledgement and education. This free online training and education provided by the Epilepsy Alliance of America takes 45 minutes at no cost to the state. The length of your favorite Netflix show can save a student's life. The Epilepsy Alliance of America also offers already a model seizure action plan, a one-sheeter that can assist school staff to save a student's life. According to the CDC, we already have 150,000 people in Georgia with epilepsy, approximately 17,000 of that being kids and teens. 20 other states have already passed seizure-safe school legislation, so it's Georgia's turn. The bill is needed. Georgia should be 21. In closing, the epilepsy community is represented by the purple awareness ribbon. Purple is a color that represents the unity between reds and blues. So let's come together in unity today on this bill, because epilepsy and seizure disorders do not discriminate between race, age, gender, religion, economic status, or political party. So let's get the school personnel trained and make families and students feel more safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. You may have noticed other people wearing purple around here today. Today's Lupus Day at the Capitol also, and there were a lot of people with purple capes on earlier.
Yes,
So, any questions for Mr. Taylor?
and I can speak to the 504
Please.
issue as well. From what we've done in other states, this is not exclusion from the 504. This is an addition to. So the seizure action plan goes more detail into what to do depending on the student's epilepsy diagnosis. And I have the one-sheeter here if y'all want to look at that as well.
Thank you for that. You could give us a copy maybe, and we can share it with the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, Dr. Menon?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about seizures and the proposed Senate Bill 45. I'm Dr. Uma Menon, Chief of Neurology at Morehouse School of Medicine, and I practice at Grady. I'm board certified in neurology and epilepsy with fellowship training from Cleveland Clinic and Yale, and I've been practicing for about 12 years. During my years of practice, although I'm an adult neurologist, I have treated several children when there was no epileptologist available or when the wait times for a child neurologist was extremely long. So a lesser known fact about epilepsy is that it's the fourth most common neurological disorder after headache, stroke, and dementia. Seizures are difficult to understand for many people as they occur intermittently and mostly without any warning. There are also many different kinds of seizures. Some of these cause people to wander about without awareness of their actions. Some others cause people to pause briefly in their actions. These are sometimes recognized in school when students are noted to be staring off or thought to be daydreaming. Others may have the more widely recognized convulsive seizure, and it can be traumatic for many, especially children, to watch the convulsive seizure, and even more traumatic for the person having it, not only to endure it, but then wake up feeling confused, sometimes after they have lost bodily control of bodily functions and with people standing around them. Some types of seizures can be triggered by flashing lights. A typical scenario is when someone is traveling in a car or a school bus and the bright sunlight flashes between trees, and that can trigger a seizure. I have heard many stories from patients that people are afraid to approach someone having a seizure and may just stand by watching without assisting. Knowing what to do when a seizure happens can be life-saving. And having an action plan for the student with seizures in school is not only critical for the student, but also a great source of relief for the parents who always worry about their child having a seizure. This way, the parents can be sure that their child is safe and will receive the appropriate immediate care while in school. In addition, I'm sure the teachers too will feel empowered to care for their students if a seizure occurs in class. Here are some statistics to consider. 1 in 10 people will have a seizure during their lifetime, and 1 in 26 will develop epilepsy, which is recurrent seizures. Epilepsy can occur at any age, but childhood is a typical time of onset. The risk of premature death in people with epilepsy is up to 3 times higher than the general population. The population of Georgia, according to the U.S. Census Bureau in July 22, was 10,912,876. Children under the age of 18 was stated as 23.4%, which is 2,553,613.
Doctor,
Now,
are you almost ready to wrap up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
So I just wanted to make the point that if you consider 1 in 26 has epilepsy, you're talking about 98,216 children. Having an action plan will have a huge impact on these children. And it is truly a life-saving skill that anyone who learns about seizure first aid will add to their knowledge. there is no greater giving than saving a life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Christy Sane? Christy, could you just tell us who you're representing?
I'm a parent advocate.
Okay.
I'm Christy Tassani, and I'm here today with my husband and my daughters. My daughter's actually supposed to be up here with me, but she's having a focal seizure right now, so maybe she'll come back in. But on January the 23rd of this year, my daughter experienced a seizure at her middle school. The school nurse administered quick assistance to my daughter by giving her a seizure rescue drug. However, the nurse only administered half of my daughter's seizure emergency drug. Due to this fact, my daughter was unable to get out of her seizure, which had then turned into a cluster seizure. We unfortunately were forced to leave school in an ambulance, who had to dispense a second seizure rescue drug to further prevent my daughter from going into status epilepticus. After this incident, I kept my daughter home from school for the remainder of the week because my security and faith had been shaken. While I do feel that my child is generally safe with the wonderful teachers and nurse at her middle school, I do not believe they are trained with enough resources to care for children with epilepsy. However, they can learn. They can learn to care for children with epilepsy just as we parents have had to educate ourselves by supplying them with more resources and toolkits. I know it is not too much to ask that every school who has a child with epilepsy to train all, if not most, staff members in the school building. It would be beneficial to have mandatory seizure action plans on file and free online training for every staff member to educate themselves on seizure safety, which is a life skill every person should know, since 1 in 10 people will experience a seizure in their lifetime, regardless whether or not they have epilepsy. As a parent advocate, I have realized the stigma and ignorance that surrounds epilepsy, but this can be alleviated through education and information about epilepsy. I, along with my husband and my daughter Christiane and Henri, support the seizure safety school bill because my daughter and her peers who have epilepsy should be supported at their local schools so that they may return home safely at the end of their school day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and sorry I mispronounced your name.
It was pretty good. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have questions?
No, I just want to say at the appropriate time.
I'll second it so it'll be red and blue.
We've got a couple more people signed up. Give me a minute here. Okay, we've got Casey Curray. Not sure I pronounced that correctly either.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Casey Curry, and like you, I wear many hats. I'm a wife, mom, teacher, Georgian, and advocate, among other things. My first experience with epilepsy was as a student in elementary school when my friend Timmy fell out of his chair and started thrashing on the ground. Epilepsy entered my world again when my best friend and teaching co-worker had a student have a seizure in her classroom right down the hall from me. That student was in my room earlier that morning and seemed totally fine. Then just a few years later, epilepsy got way more personal with me. Our middle son, Kyle, had his first grand mal seizure right in our living room at the age of 16. It's scary to see your healthy son suddenly have a seizure. Honestly, my husband, a family practitioner, initially thought Kyle had a brain tumor. When he was diagnosed with epilepsy, this sounded like the best case scenario. As parents, we had to train Kyle's brothers, friends, teachers, and coaches on what to do when he had seizures. Little did we know that 3.5 years later, epilepsy would take his life at the age of 19 years, 8 months, and 6 days. He experienced SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death of someone with epilepsy. On May 6, 2020, our world turned upside down and has never been the same. I come to you today as a mother and an educator with 25 years of experience in both the public and private schools. In my experience, there hasn't been adequate training given to teachers to handle a situation involving a seizure. I support the Seizure Safe bills because I love my family, my students, my community, and my fellow man. Teachers are the first line of defense in the classroom when a student drops. The seizure training is not only a win for our students, but even a bigger win for the people of Georgia. In closing, I wear purple today in honor of my son Kyle and all Georgians who have experienced seizures in their lifetime. About 2 years ago, I had this purple ribbon tattooed on my wrist in honor of my son, along with his initials KJK plus the words "Choose Joy." I hope that this committee chooses joy along with me and chooses to pass Senate Bill 49 on to the Senate floor vote. I know that Kyle and many of my fellow teachers would support this bill, and I hope you will too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, and we have one more person signed up, Buddy Costley.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, committee members. My name is Buddy Costley, and I represent the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders, which is approximately 3,000 school assistant principals, district office leaders, and superintendents who would actually administrate this legislation. And one of the first things I wanted to do in this very brief testimony is brag on a senator. This bill has gone the way I feel like legislation ought to go. The senator reached out to us last year and said, hey, look, I've got an idea for a bill. What would happen if we did this? And could you tell me what would happen? And so it was very collaborative, et cetera. I just want to say thank you to Senator Anna Vitardi for allowing us to share that collaboration. I also want to thank the chairman for her time last night as well when I had a few questions. There's a couple of issues that we wanted to bring up that actually came to light in the committee. One is the August 1st, Senator Burns, my old colleague, my colleague from board days gone past, I did bring up to the senator, and he encouraged me to share this, that because we've given the department until August 1st, there are many students that will come to pre-planning when this training would be accomplished in July and already be in school theoretically by August 1st. And August 1st seems to be an aggressive deadline that I'm not sure what your protocols are. You might make a friendly amendment suggestion in terms of making that October 1st so that, especially the first year, that's able to get across to cover that gap. The only other thing that I would like to say other than thank you is, in regards to the 504 process, obviously I've helped supervise that process for many years. It would be very, very common for a seizure issue to be in the 504 process. This plan, however, we see as separate. Obviously, it should be submitted during the 504 committee, but the 504 process is a committee structure in which staff, mom and dad get together and create accommodations together that might be in excess of this plan or just with this plan in consideration. So I'm glad to take any questions. I just want to say thank you for the process.
Thank you very much. Senator Anna Vitardi, could you come back up? I wanted to know if you have any recommendation about moving the date back.
Yeah, I mean, as a former school board member, I mean, I'm sensitive to what I think Senator Mallow was saying. I think 30 days really won't, I don't think it will change. 30, 45 days won't change this, but it will ensure that we maximize the amount of teachers on the front end going forward without seeing further delays down the road. So I think we're pretty flexible in making that change. Okay.
Senator Brass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, it seems like to me with the Epilepsy Alliance of America, and we've got other associations out there, I feel like all these guidelines that we're going to be implementing are already out there. We just got to adopt them. So I don't understand why the extra needed time. I think that's just, I don't see the purpose, in my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for the committee? If not, I think Senator Hatchett wanted to make a motion. You had a question?
Just one quick question. Dr. Costley, as the Georgia Department of Education, they have a role in this?
I'm sorry.
Does the Georgia Department of Education have a role in this? They have to develop the plan,
They have to develop the training
the training program.
requirements.
Do we have a representative of the Georgia Department of Education here who can speak to that?
Right here.
Oh, good, thank you. Would you speak to this, please? Just, I don't want to delay it either. I want it to be implemented as quickly as possible. I just want to make sure that everyone is comfortable.
Absolutely. Carrie Pritchard with the Department of Education. Of course, we would love extra time. I think anybody would like a little bit extra time to ensure that we are implementing correctly and with fidelity. But it's really the will of the committee and the decision that you guys choose to make. We can work with either date.
Thank you. Senator Hatchett. Now, this is the appropriate time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I make a motion to pass Senate Bill 45 LC 491359S.
Second.
Okay, second by Senator Mello. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, the bill passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Can I make one quick comment? I know you're trying to get on, but I did leave out, I do want to recognize Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for all their support work. John, your entire crew, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith's back there representing Showa. Okay, we're going to go out of order now because Senator Strickland, like many others, have to be in more than one place at the same time. So, Senator Strickland, would you mind coming and talking to us about Senate Bill 133?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm working off of LC 480879S. Is that what y'all have?
That's what we have.
So I apologize I wasn't here last week. I think Senator Cowser presented the bill initially for me. I read your testimony, the questions that y'all had. In the meantime, what we've done, in particular, Ms. Regina Quick and Director Brose, who are here with DFACS, have worked with our juvenile court judges to make changes to the bill to hopefully improve the process. Bottom line, you have really three, the way I view it, three buckets, the wrong word, three different types of ways that a child gets ordered into state custody with DFACS. You have a dependency action that has due process built into it. We're not talking about that. You have the CHINS action, delinquency action, where you can also have a child enter the system through either one of those without any other process set up. What we're doing with this bill is setting up a process for due process, first off, for those two types of actions, making sure that parents have certain rights. Obviously, a child has certain rights as well. But on top of that, we're trying to make sure that DFACS is notified, is at the table, and is ready to receive a child. And that's where the housing and the hoteling issue comes into this. So in doing this, some of the criticism, I think some of y'all had questions you had too, is what happens in an emergency situation, first off. Well, this doesn't change that. Emergency shelter orders can still be entered no matter what. If there's an emergency where a child can still get help right away, be removed from a harmful situation right away. Other questions really have come up from the judges, legitimate questions about the process itself to make sure this works in every courtroom around our state. And that's what we've done with the changes to this bill. I can briefly go through what changed, some of its technicalities if you'd like. And if it's okay to make it quicker, because there's two parts of the bill. First being the CHINS part, second being the delinquency part. And the changes are almost identical, so I can walk through the changes one time if you like. So looking, you probably don't have the original draft, do you? We just have the new bill?
We just have the new bill.
I'll be quick. So here are the places that changed from the original draft you looked at last week.
We do have the key changes in our bill summary.
Oh, you already have the changes? Okay.
In
Well,
the summary,
in
yeah.
the summary, you'll see, I'll be really quick then, take questions if you'd like.
Yeah, the LC 480879S.
Right. So very quickly then, line 19, this is what a court has to do. These are the requirements they have. A simple change, but it says now the court must make reasonable efforts, you see on that line, to secure the placement other than in custody of DFACS. That language is different from what originally existed, where it said must have exhausted other efforts. The words do matter in some of these changes when it comes to what a court has to do. We've removed the requirement that the court make a Child Protective Services report to the statewide Child Protective Services intake communications center, and that's on lines 21 and 22 of the original bill. You'll see, though, the ad on lines 42 through 46 now has DJJ or the County Operator Probation Office doing that instead. Take one more thing off our courts. You'll also see line 28. The original bill had DFACs being given sufficient time. A little bit vague in how that was originally written. Now it says the opportunity to make reasonable efforts, so it's changed the language there. And you'll see on line 30, originally we had meaningful opportunity there for DFACs. Now it's just the opportunity. And the same thing on line 36, where it used to say meaningful opportunity. Now it's just opportunity. And I've already gone through lines 42 through 46, the addition there. And two other things. Looking on line 53, lines 53 and 54 of the bill, instead of having the 72-hour clock start after a referral, now it starts after a child's been ordered into custody of DFACs. And looking at lines 63 and 64, this goes back to whether or not a court in the original draft had an affirmative duty to issue a subpoena for these records. Now it's say immediately or the production of the records versus having this affirmative duty to do a subpoena. I did that kind of quickly. Some of that's legalese, I know. And I know we have Ms. Quick here for any particular questions, but you see the goal was to try to take some of the concerns that you guys had and also that the judges had in this process and make those changes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We do have a couple questions, and we'll try to get you out of here on time, and then we'll keep going. Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Senator Strickland. Question, when we are on line 41, moving through kind of like 41 to 54, my question is, how many removals are juvenile court judges ordering from the bench? Do we know that?
I don't know. Is there any data on that? I'm looking at my DFACs folks. I don't know the number. It's probably hard to track that as well. Again, there's three different ways this may happen, and if these are happening in the chins or delinquency matters, we may not have data on that.
And I know that our last conversation was talking about working with the juvenile court judges, but I'm also now a little bit concerned that we've shifted some of this to DJJ. And so have they had a chance to review this? Because this will impact those probation officers greatly, especially in court. And I saw one of the other changes that talked about on the first half of the bill about all of those parties being at court in relation to the chins. Will this now require DFACs to be present in court at the same time? I know our judges have large dockets on juvenile court, and if they've got to keep having hearings, if everybody showed up for their docket at the same time, DJJ, DFACs, everybody was there for the juvenile court docket when this was being discussed, could we reduce the redundancy that a juvenile court judge may have to take on their caseload?
We had several questions in there. Going back on the new the new obligation on DJJ and County Operator Probation Office. That's just the report part. So I don't know the answer as to whether or not they were involved in that conversation. Maybe it was a request from DJJ.
And
from
Senator,
the judges.
Senator, we do have them represented here to testify. They're signed up.
Okay.
So they may be able to answer
that
our questions. We're going to take a couple more questions after you finish your sentence.
Okay.
And then we're going to go ahead and ask the folks who are signed up to testify to come
And
up.
I think the other thing you're asking about is requiring DFACs to be present. Obviously, we need them to be present. What this does with the new draft, though, is it lets the court still operate in the event they aren't there, is what I would say. They need to be there, though. So we're trying to balance this. They need to be present for these hearings. That's kind of the main goal here, is for notice to be given so DFACs can be present and make the case. But we also have some flexibility for courts given different circumstances they may find themselves in.
Just further question, Senator. When we talk about line 19, confirm that all parties to the Chin's case have made reasonable efforts to secure placement of the child other than in the custody of DFACS. I think if DFACS was present during the Chin's hearing, then they would hear what other efforts and remedies by the court have been made and other parties to not place the child into the custody of DFACS. And so by them not being required to be there, then the judges, in my opinion, and the probation officers are going to have to do duplication to go back and re-explain what they had maybe already discussed in that hearing if they had been present.
Well, do you want to add anything? There isn't any change on the bill when it comes to anybody being present.
Well, I think it just says confirm that all parties have made reasonable efforts to secure placement of the child other than in the custody of DFACS. And so I think the court and juvenile court judges are doing that. And I think DFACS and the folks who would be in court would know that information, so we don't have to deal with that kind of like this delay for them to find out what has been done. Because, to have your juvenile court judge or their attorney or court administrator try to compile what had been done and maybe had been discussed in that hearing, all of the parties would have heard what would have been already discussed, so we didn't waste time figuring out what had or had not already been done, is kind of my question with that.
But all this bill is doing is now codifying the fact that the court must find that other reasonable efforts have been made to secure other alternatives. And so this isn't any sort of drastic change made from the way it's currently operating, but we're codifying that. And so I don't really know where you're going with that, but I will agree with you that DFACS needs to be present for these hearings.
Most juvenile court proceedings, everybody's at the table anyway. That's
the way it's supposed to be.
DJJ or DFACS, I mean, everybody, when there's a kid involved and there's an issue of where the kid's going, everybody comes to the table immediately.
So we're going to have to adjust our schedule a little bit here, and we're going to allow one more question for you, and then Senator Brass also has at 3 o'clock. And so we're going to let him present his bill, and then we'll come back to this bill. So let me ask, did you want to ask your question, Senator Brass? Okay.
First, thank you, the author, and certainly I support the intent. I have a question from my juvenile court judge in Columbia County, Charles E. Chip Evans. And I'm way out of my lane, so let me read what he asked. I do not understand how a judge can deal with a family or individual discovered in court to have present custody of children in a state of dependency when it appears that the family or individual take flight to avoid a DFACS investigation. So what happens is if the family or individual apparently perceives that there's going to be a dependency judgment and DFACS is called. So DFACS is not yet in the room. DFACS does not yet have this issue on their radar. How do we deal with the issue, especially in Columbia County, which borders South Carolina?
So others may have more to add, but also that's the purpose of this. The way I'm understanding his question, if you're in another matter, delinquency or child in need of services matter, and the issue of dependency is coming up, we don't have anything codified as to how we deal with that process. This sets that process up.
So how would a judge deal with the issue of discovering a child in need of services in the courtroom, and the concern is that the family or the individual who has custody then takes flight? I don't know. Again, I'm way out of my league, folks. I'm just asking.
Probably am too.
So he mentioned earlier when he began to present the bill that this bill is not going to restrict or hamper or remove a judge's independent ability to seek shelter care on an emergency basis for the child.
So they could seek shelter care.
They would consider an order that would provide for shelter care of that child, and DFACS would get involved to go and take custody.
So this is before the child might even leave the court. Is that what you're suggesting?
Certainly, that could be something that they consider. And I would also add, too, that, what we're trying to do is strike the right balance. And I would say I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a proceeding where it was I can't recall if it was a CHINS or a delinquency proceeding, but DFACS was not present at that proceeding. And we had a child entered into our custody, and we did not know the child's name. It ended up taking 48 hours before we could even ascertain the child's name. So that's one of the many scenarios where this bill, we believe, will strike the right balance. Of course, it's always going to be a possibility that a family would try to flee state intervention, but we think that this is probably the best framework for making sure that the right people are in these proceedings, or that we get timely notice of the proceedings with the right information to quickly act. Otherwise, we get in a situation where it's 48 hours before we even know what child we're trying to find.
And again, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate your consideration. Perhaps I could ask you to respond to my judge and clarify this point.
I will. I'll give him a call later,
Thank you.
too.
Okay, so I guess Senator Brass had to leave, so we'll continue with this conversation. Oh, you're going to do his.
I can assist. I can walk through the respite care bill for Senator Brass. He had a quick, but I'm comfortable. I'm here. So
You don't have to go anywhere right now?
Eventually, I have to be in judiciary in front of Chairman.
It's not till 8 o'clock.
Okay, so I think you're good then. So if it's okay with you, let's proceed with this conversation and then switch gears. Thank you. Okay, we do have, are there more questions from the committee? We do have several people to testify on this. That may answer some of the questions anyway.
Absolutely.
So,
Council Juvenile Court Judge is present, Madam Chairwoman.
I'm sorry.
Is the Council Juvenile Court Judge is present?
Yes. In fact, let's go ahead with Judge Hurd, if you wouldn't mind coming up.
Good afternoon. All right, good afternoon. You guys already know me, but I am Render Hurd. I'm the judge of the juvenile courts of the Tifton Judicial Circuit down in Tifton and surrounding counties, and I'm also president of the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. First of all, I want to say that I appreciate greatly that the work that has been done with the department over the past week or so. I'm sure General Counsel Quick and the Commissioner have heard and seen enough of me over the last few days. We've been working diligently to try to work out some things that we think are problematic in the bill at this point. We have been able to work a few of those out. I also want to start off by saying that the department has a real need in some of these cases to obtain information as quickly as possible when they are given a child, quote unquote, from the bench. I thought the best way, we've heard that term several times now, custody from the bench, custody from the bench. What does that mean, okay? And I thought I'd give you a quick situation. We have a child, a female child who's 15 years old, and she's on trial for the delinquent offense of aggravated assault of her mother. She has attacked her mother. And during the trial, she takes the stand, and she said, "Yes, sir, I did attack my mother, and I did beat my mother, but it's because she's been letting her boyfriend rape me for the past 2 months, and I got tired of it." Well, at that point, we're in the delinquency trial. She's on trial. The mother is not even a party in the case at that point. Okay, but I have definitive evidence before me that this child is at risk of serious harm if that child is sent home that day. All right? And so as judges, we have to do something then. Okay, we can't leave that child at harm and at risk of harm. And what we are able to do in that point is get DFACS involved and say, DFACS, we've heard this evidence. Here, you are going to give you custody so that you can protect this child until we figure out, what else is going on. Because we have heard evidence that this child does not need to go home today, right now, and it may be 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so that's one situation. There are many. Another common one is we have a child at the RYDC, and the parent of the child says, I'm not going to get the child. The child's attacked my 5-year-old. He's told me he's going to kill me in my sleep, and I'm scared of him, and I'm not going to get him. Because of the way the delinquency rules are, I may or may not be able to I may be required to release the child from the RYDC at that point. So I got a child on the steps of the RYDC and nobody to go get him. Okay, and it is very frustrating, and I 100% understand the department's frustration when you get that call. What do you do with that child who's not going to be placed in a foster home, who's not going to be placed, there's nobody standing up and waiting to take the 15-year-old who's coming out of RYDC to go into a foster home. Very difficult to place. It is a very difficult prospect. The problem that we see is that in the current framework of this bill, there are a lot of procedural issues and other issues that it would create. I do, as hard as we work to try to get on the same page as to everything, we have not been able to get there, and there's a couple of things that we still disagree with. The first is that this bill would not tie our hands any more than they already are. In other words, it would not inhibit our ability, to place children in emergency shelter care. I would disagree with that. If you look in section 2, starting on 67, the bill says prior to placing a child in the custody of DFACS, the court shall. So prior to placing the child in the custody of DFACS, and then it has that list of things: inquire, confirm, make child protective, all those things, that we have to inquire about these people. Well, the first thing we need to understand is that in a CHINS or a delinquency case, the parties are, the way the law is currently set up, only the state, which in that case is the DA's office, and the child, which may be a 10-year-old child. So it says I got to inquire about to a 10-year-old, what services may be available. The DA's offices are not equipped to do that because they don't work in the service industry. They work in some other area, and so it's difficult. Now that doesn't belittle the fact that the department still has an issue. Because somebody's going to call them at 5 o'clock. And say, you got to do something with this child. One of the things that's very frustrating for them at this point is that we may have DJJ who may have a psychological evaluation on the child in their possession. It may be in the clerk's file. In the clerk's file. And the department says, hey, can we get that psychological? Because it may help us get this child placed in a special facility because the child's diagnosed with ADHD or bipolar disorder or whatever, And since they're not a party, they can't get it. The clerks won't give it to them because there's federal and state laws that say that that's confidential. The DJJ won't give it to them, and they're standing there going, you got to be kidding me. You're giving me this child, y'all got all this information, and you won't give it to us. So they need that information. The problem is there are a lot, and I won't go through all of them, but there are a lot of procedural issues that the way the bill is currently framed presents for us. The most significant of which is if we have to do all of these inquiries and confirmations before we can place a child into emergency custody, then what do I do at 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon when I don't have those people aren't in my courtroom to, where does the child go to? I can't send the child home to a mother who is letting her boyfriend do unspeakable things to them. And so that's the dilemma. We're trying to make sure a couple of things that we were very concerned with, that being the primary one, we have to be able to protect these children when it's necessary. The second was the initial bill indicated that we had to subpoena documents and other things, and we were very concerned about that. Thankfully, and to the department's credit, we've worked to get that part out of the bill. That assists a lot, making sure the judges don't get involved in the discovery process to say, There are other issues, don't want to go through all of them at this point. I'll be glad to take any questions you have, but those are some of the issues we see in this admitted problem, something we got to, fix and give the department some assistance, but we have to do so in a manageable way that doesn't adversely affect our ability to protect children.
Okay, we have a couple questions. Senator Payne?
Yes, thank you for being here, Judge. I worked in juvenile court for 30 years. I was worked for DJJ, and I was a caseworker for 30 years with DJJ. And so I was there, and all that changes when we went from status offenses and unruly to chins and the new concept of chins, and that's where I watched it was just falling because nobody was taking accountability. When chins came along, everybody said, well, it's DJJ was telling DFAS, well, it's not our case anymore. DFAS was looking at DJJ's, well, it's not ours anymore. But my question is, a few minutes ago you mentioned that a parent who didn't pick up their child, is that parent charged in your courtroom?
There is no charge currently in the law with which we can charge them.
You couldn't charge them with abandonment?
Because we don't prosecute adults in my courtroom. And
well, see, that's where I keep running back because of my.
I think there's a disagreement from the department about that.
Well, my point is it's not holding parent. That was the frustration of working. What I did is the fact that we're aiding and abetting parents being non-parents and washing their hands of their own children and then holding a child in contempt because of something that the parents have done. Does that make sense?
And I agree. And there's some question about how that happens. And we do have contempt powers, but in a delinquency case, the parent is not even a party in that situation. And so from a jurisdictional standpoint, there's nothing, and of course, in many situations, the parent has a real fear. Okay, I mean, they've got younger children. I've seen this. Now, we have 100%, we have some parents who are neglecting their responsibility. Okay, and that's why it's difficult. That's why I've got gray hair. I didn't 10 years ago when I got on the bench. Okay, but it's very difficult to try to ascertain which parents are neglecting their responsibility and which parents have a 3-year-old at their home and that they're scared that this other child who has got bipolar and is out of control is going to harm their 3-year-old. And so there's two different situations, when a parent doesn't want to pick up a child. I'm scared, and this is a good instance. The child says, if I come home with you, I'm going to kill you. Well, if nobody hears it, there's no prosecution because terroristic threats has to have an independent, have an independent witness. So, but the mom heard it. Okay, and she's scared to death, and so those are the things that we juggle with, and that they're very difficult decisions to try to figure out when the parents are. What the department wants to do, and I agree with them, is in the cases where they can talk to mom and say, hey, how about we get you a counselor and get this kid, some help, and we can do this in the home. There are certain situations where we can do that, and they want every opportunity to do that, and they should have as much opportunity as possible, provided we're able to keep both that child and the other children safe. And that's the dilemma, and that's where we're all juggling, because we're all trying to get to the to the right answer there. It's just how we're going to do that. One thing I would point out, and Senator Strickland mentioned this, the three different ways, the dependency way to come into foster care, the CHINS way, and the delinquency way. And this is important in your bill. In a CHINS case, we can place children in the custody of the department without any separate finding of dependency. Okay, in a delinquency case, you have to have found the child also dependent some way. Okay, so we've got on this side of the dependency and this side in the delinquency, both of those require dependency finding. The CHINS case, the way the law is currently written, does not require separate dependency finding. And that's, that is a distinction that does make a difference.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes.
Okay, Senator Mello, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Judge Render, for being here. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question is, when you have these parents that are before you on the CHINS cases, and they basically just tell the court, listen, the kid can't come back with me. And is that an admission to the court that they're relinquishing their right to be a parent to that child, saying, this child isn't coming back with me. Either you take them or they're not coming back with me.
So it's arguable, okay, there, whether they're talking about temporarily, forever, you know, and of course, we're in a dilemma where we do have some parents that are just completely shirking their responsibility, okay, in those circumstances. As any of you guys who've raised children know, teenagers are hard, okay, and teenagers with mental health issues are a whole different, issue, and that is why the department has such a difficult problem, because they are charged with finding somewhere for these kids to go. And there aren't, I've raised two teenage girls. One, I've got 6 months left with her as a teenager. But I tell, there's not a line of people waiting to take an unruly 15-year-old girl or boy, for that matter. Okay, they're not there, and that's where they have such a gargantuan task, and that's what they're trying to get help for. And we think they need as much help as possible. We just want to do it in a manner that we're procedurally we can, it's workable, and we're able to make sure that we're keeping children safe.
And so in the Chins, how long can you hold a child in detention? So if this was a Thursday and you hear this on the bench and you order a child into custody, or you basically take custody of the child, and you say, okay, we don't have anywhere for him to go, we hold him in detention. This is the only place we got in juvenile detention, and it's a Thursday. How long can they stay in juvenile detention before they have, I guess, a due process right to get out of detention? What does that do?
So with Chins, with the exception of runaway, and I'll take runaway separately because there's several different ways that you become a Chins child. The three most common are truancy, you've missed more than 10 days of unexcused absences in the school year, ungovernable or unruly, and you've heard that, won't mind your mom and daddy, as my daddy used to say, and then runaway. With any of the Chins actions except for runaway, we cannot hold them in detention at all. And with a runaway, we can hold a child for 24 hours, and then at the continued custody hearing, we release them. And so runaways are one of the major issues that the department's having, because I've got a child today that ran again. Again, I say, because the department's pulled their hair out trying to find somewhere where she'll stay. But as it is, I cannot detain a Chins kid. I can detain a delinquent kid who has committed a felony, all right? But many kids commit serious crimes. We don't call them crimes, okay? Would be crimes if they were adult, okay? Delinquent acts, okay? We call them delinquent acts. But they commit serious actions, and the most significant one is that are misdemeanors, for which we cannot detain right now, is possession of a handgun by a person under the age of 18. Currently, that's a misdemeanor in our state, okay, and one that I cannot detain a kid for, all right? So kid has 4 guns, and I get him, he goes home, or even worse, to their nightmare, I somehow have some way to give them to the department, and then they're really scrambling. Okay, but we're faced with some tough choices, and that's the problem. These are all tough choices.
Judge, can you stand by?
Absolutely.
We have more testimony we need to do, and we're running out of time rapidly.
Absolutely,
So,
be glad to.
Melissa Carter.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. By way of quick introduction, I know many of you, I'm pleased to say so. Melissa Carter, I'm the director of the Barton Child Law and Policy Center at Emory Law School. The Barton Center, also I hope many of you are knowledgeable about, through the provision of legal services and public education and policy development and legislative advocacy. We've worked for more than 20 years in trying to help promote better outcomes for children in particular and their families who are involved with our child welfare and juvenile justice systems. I've had the privilege to work as our state child advocate under Governor Perdue and to work with Governor Deal and Governor Kemp in the development of their signature platforms on foster care and adoption reform. So hopefully that allows my opinion to be something of value to you, which is ultimately what we want to do. It's hard to evaluate this bill a little bit and tell you what our interests are. I start with saying that the bill was originally presented to this committee and in other public forums is referenced in response to the dominating conversation we're having around hoteling. And so really thinking about it, I would say we certainly have a shared interest in figuring out how to solve that very difficult problem and in supporting the agency in developing more solutions. As a response to hoteling, certainly we have to ask the question of whether this legislative change or how this legislative change helps us serve those children with complex needs better, or how it might address the conditions in the community and the family that we need in order to prevent entry into foster care. And on that level, certainly I don't think it does. And I think maybe that's the first concern that I bring forward to your attention or observation I would make about the bill. We know hoteling is not unique. We know it's complex. It's an enduring problem. We know that we've heard a lot of really powerful testimony, very real experiences about managing those cases of children who are hoteled exacts a real toll on the system and on the child welfare workforce. As far as the children are concerned, certainly it represents a real failure of the state to meet the responsibilities that we have to protect children and to ensure their well-being. And that's more than just a policy choice, that's a legal duty. We know that because many states are being sued over the issue of hoteling, and our own state is under federal investigation for our management of that issue. So the question then became, why are children hoteled, and does this address any of those causal issues? Children are hoteled generally, for a lot of reasons, but generally because their needs exceed the ability of their parents to care for them. That's the only reason any parent would turn to the state to help parent. And so ultimately, hoteling becomes an issue of placement and service capacity, a problem of lack of placement and service capacity. This bill, on the one hand, has certainly been presented, and in its design is one that addresses what has been understood as sort of the need for a procedural clarification about how certain cases move from court into foster care. But if hoteling is really about a placement and service capacity issue, it's not about a procedural gap. Right? It's about something much greater than that. And so addressing things procedurally is a bit misaligned with where the problem is and where the solution needs to be. Commissioner Brose has provided powerful testimony with what I completely agree about the need for greater access to more services and to more specialized services in the community so that families don't have to ask DFACS for help. That's not what DFACS should be for. Commissioner Brose has also mentioned, which I agree, DFACS is not itself have some mysterious treasure trove of services that they can tap into. And so from the bill itself then really just accommodates DFACS in providing them with more time to essentially rediscover that we don't have placement or services for these kids. And while we provide that accommodation of time, it comes at the expense of children. You've heard that children who are high need and low risk are going to be staying in detention, even when it's unlawful to do so, because we have no other place to put them. That children with mental and behavioral health challenges, we're really sort of uncertain where they go while DFACS does all of this work that the court's required to tolerate and required to allow for. They're probably not eligible for crisis stabilization, and they can't go home, right, where things are really problematic and disrupted and perhaps dangerous for them or their families. And so I would say also that even at the level of criteria, this isn't a child protection bill either, because it doesn't serve the interests of children first and foremost. It's about accommodating the agency and its very real challenges with capacity. It's very real challenges in serving complex children. But that doesn't mean that the needs of these children just go away because we're trying to let the agency figure out how to serve them. They're real and present and urgent and now, and that's how removals from the bench happen. And so then that also, brings me to sort of the mechanics in the bill.
Can you kind of
Absolutely.
speed up? We're running out of time.
Yeah, so there are two mechanics in the bill, right? To focus on reasonable efforts, which is a federal requirement that is about governing and restraining the state's intervention in family privacy. And here it's used instead in a redesigned way to accommodate the agency's needs. And again, reasonable efforts to what? To discover that we still don't have placement and services, which is always going to be the truth for now. The other piece is around the agency in a variety of ways, getting the benefits of being a legal party without having the responsibilities. You see that in the opportunity to be present. You see that in the requirements for the court to facilitate information exchange to them. And you see that in their ability to move for a continuance. Those are the rights of parties. And so there's a fix to that. We can make them a party to these proceedings, but that's not what this bill allows for. And so just in conclusion, right, that I think there's an opportunity here to solve for a problem, to get and have the right conversation about what children need if we put children's needs first and not the needs of the system that we've designed poorly to serve those needs of those children.
Thank you.
And I should say, I know no one wants to hear that. I understand that. We all want the solution, and I know no one wants to hear that this isn't it.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
Is she the last one to speak?
I'm sorry, what?
Was this the last?
Yes, but we really need to move it along because
Thank you for your time.
there's another committee meeting in this room, so we're.
I was just gonna make a motion.
I don't think we're in a posture for a motion. We've still got people to testify. Okay, Commissioner Brose, could you come up?
May I make a closing statement? I think the last speaker was really more identifying the overall issues with housing. I don't know if we can disagree with a lot of that, the problems we have to solve. I think the bigger question is this getting us closer when it comes to a process? Again, this is a little bit in the weeds, but the alternative is you have no process set up at all for these type of proceedings. We're trying to set up a process that at least we have certain findings where we can try to make sure we're looking at all efforts before we just send a child in the DFACS. And what I asked the committee to do, given the hour, not just today, but of session, is to move the bill with the understanding that we'll keep working with the judges on some of the language here, because there has to be a balance here. I think the judges hopefully would agree we need some sort of guidance in the law. So that would be my request to the committee.
She still has to speak. Did you still want to speak, Commissioner?
I'll make it incredibly brief. So I know there are still some lingering questions, and I'll make sure to go to each. I know you had some questions. I'll make sure to get with each of you so that those are answered. I would say the same. I would echo that. I would strongly encourage and, in fact, beg that this committee still move this bill. We will continue to work with the judges to make sure that we strike the right balance. I will give you that promise. We are moving in the right direction, and I do respectfully disagree that this bill does not accomplish what we need to try to address the issue of hoteling. In fact, so many of these children come into our care, and when we do not have the opportunity, some opportunity to actually be involved, it's not just harmful to our agency, it's harmful to the due process rights of the child and their parents. And we've got to have a better process in place. This will go very far for our agency, but more so for the children and the parents who are affected by it. I can tell you that, I heard from the judge, being a teenager is hard. Being in foster care is hard. And at least that child and their parents should have the right opportunity to be involved in that. And if DFACS also can have more of an opportunity to be involved, then we can better serve that child right as soon as we get involved, as opposed to days or weeks later without the right information in front of us to serve them and make sure that they're doing well in our custody.
Thank you. Senator Robertson.
Just briefly, Madam Chair, having been involved in this for over 30 years, and along with my fellow Senator, Senator Payne, and seeing this and watching children in the hoteling and having experienced children running away and becoming part of the criminal element and dying in the streets here in Atlanta of a particular case that I recall. I think if we ever think there's a piece of legislation that's going to come up that deals with multiple departments and they're going to walk in the room arm in arm singing Kumbaya, then I think we're in the wrong business. I think this is a step in the right direction, and because of that, I do make a motion do pass that we move this and give these professionals the opportunity to sit down and solve this problem at the table together, because holding this up further is only putting more children in danger. And I
Is
make
there-
that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Senator Robertson, second by Senator Payne. Any further discussion? Okay.
Madam Chair, to the author of the bill for the intent and the agency, this is my third year in the General Assembly, and I've heard the line, "We'll fix it." Actually, I heard that line more when I was in the House. Hurry up, get it out, we'll fix it in the Senate. And today I'm hearing the Senate say, hurry up, get it out. And does this body trust the House to fix that? How are we going to fix this bill? Because after it comes out of committee, it cannot be amended in rules. So how are we going to fix it?
Amended on the floor. And if I go to the floor of the Senate with the same version, you'll make that speech and say you promised he'd fix it and you didn't do a thing about it.
Yeah, this isn't the House, Senator.
I'm glad you know that.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand.
Thank you.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, we're moving the bill out of committee onto rules. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm going to run to retirement.
Okay, and now we have Senator Brass's bill 216, and Senator Brass had to go, so Senator Robertson, you're 14?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you want to present from there?
Madam Chair, with your permission, I would like to present from here.
That's fine.
This is just a brief bill by Senator Brass, Senate Bill 216. Primarily what it does is if you look at the legislation, it defines respite care, dealing with children in foster care, and it replaces just language related to babysitting and occasional short-term babysitting with respite care. And what you found, if you're familiar with the foster care system, is there's the heavy lifting that foster parents have to do when they need to take care of themselves is very limited under the current statute. So what this does under respite care is give them opportunities to follow rules established by the department so that they're able to get 72 hours away from the child if necessary, or longer based on the rules established by the department. And I would, having been involved in the foster care training program and having worked with DFACS, this is extremely important if we want to keep good men and women coming into the foster care program to help these children out. So I ask for favorable consideration from the committee.
Any questions for Senator Robertson?
I'm ready to make a motion whenever you're prepared.
Okay, we're in that posture. It's appropriate to make a motion.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we would move due pass on LC 339403, and that's Senate Bill 216.
Who seconded it? Senator Hutchett. Okay. All right, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion do pass, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I trust that the department folks are going to continue to work with the judges and try to get us something acceptable for purposes of rules. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.